Hello, and welcome to Sleep Archive. Tonight, we turn our lens inward to the most mysterious and essential phase of our existence, the biology of sleep and rest. We will explore the complex neurochemistry and the silent hydraulic tides that refresh the mind, beginning with the invisible weight that accumulates within us every hour we are awake. Our journey begins not in the depths of the night, but at the very moment we wake, as the brain initiates a silent, molecular countdown known as sleep pressure. This pressure is driven by a remarkable molecule called adenosine, a chemical byproduct of the very energy that allows us to think, move, and perceive the world. As our neurons fire throughout the day, they consume a high-energy molecule known as adenosine triphosphate, or ATP, which acts as the primary fuel for every cellular action in the human system. As this fuel is burned, a small, leftover fragment adenosine is released into the spaces between our brain cells, where it begins to drift and accumulate like a slow-falling, invisible mist. The architecture of the brain is designed to monitor this accumulation with incredible precision, using specialized receptors that act as docking stations for these drifting molecules. Throughout the morning and early afternoon, the level of adenosine remains low, and the brain functions with a high degree of alertness and processing speed. However, with every passing hour of wakefulness, the concentration of adenosine continues to rise, steadily filling the neural environment with a signal of accumulating fatigue. This is the adenosine hourglass, a biological tracking system that measures exactly how long it has been since we last experienced the restorative power of sleep. The more energy we expend, the more we think, the more we solve problems, and the more we engage with our surroundings, the faster this molecular silt builds up within our system. As the adenosine levels reach a critical threshold, they begin to bind more frequently to the receptors in the basal forebrain and other regions responsible for maintaining our arousal. When an adenosine molecule docks into its receptor, it acts as a subtle inhibitory signal, gently whispering to the neurons to slow their rate of firing and to reduce the intensity of their communication. This is the biological origin of the sleep drive, a physical and chemical necessity that grows heavier and more insistent with every minute that passes toward evening. The accumulation of adenosine is what creates the sensation of heaviness in the mind, the feeling that thoughts are moving more slowly and that the world is becoming a little more distant. It is a masterpiece of biological regulation, ensuring that the brain never operates beyond its capacity for repair and that it eventually seeks the stillness required for renewal. Interestingly, the human system has discovered a way to temporarily bypass this hourglass through the consumption of caffeine, one of the most widely used psychoactive substances in the world. The caffeine molecule is structurally similar to adenosine, allowing it to fit into the same neural receptors like a key that fits the lock but refuses to turn. By occupying these docking stations, caffeine prevents the actual adenosine molecules from delivering their signal of fatigue, effectively masking the brain's awareness of its own tiredness. However, the adenosine does not disappear. It continues to accumulate in the background, piling up outside the blocked receptors like water behind a dam. When the caffeine is eventually metabolized and cleared from the system, the accumulated flood of adenosine rushes into the receptors all at once, leading to the sudden and profound exhaustion known as the caffeine crash. This process serves as a reminder that sleep pressure is an inevitable and non-negotiable debt that the body must eventually pay back to maintain its internal equilibrium. As you visualize this process, imagine the adenosine molecules as soft, glowing grains of sand falling through the hourglass of your consciousness, marking the steady passage of the day. This molecular weight is not a burden, but a vital signal, a protective mechanism that prepares the landscape of the brain for the deep cleaning and reorganization that is soon to follow. The architecture of the adenosine system ensures that our periods of activity are always balanced by periods of recovery, maintaining the delicate homeostasis of the neural network. The feeling of tiredness is the brain's way of acknowledging its own hard work, a chemical invitation to begin the process of retreating from the external world. The higher the adenosine levels, the more ripe the brain becomes for the transition into the first stages of sleep, making the eventual descent into rest more efficient and profound. In the quiet of the evening, this molecular pressure works in tandem with the fading light of the sun to signal the body's master clock that the time for wakefulness is drawing to a close. The transition from the adenosine hourglass to the internal timing of the brain is a shift from a measure of time awake to a measure of time of day. The architecture of the sleep drive has provided the pressure, and now the system is ready to synchronize that pressure with the celestial rhythms of the planet. We rest in the knowledge that our fatigue is a purposeful and intelligent part of our biology, a signal that the mind is ready to refresh its many complex structures. The journey continues toward the master clock deep within the brain, where the signals of light and dark dictate the grand timing of our biological night. The adenosine silt is now deep, the receptors are nearly full, and the brain is beginning to turn its focus away from the noise of the day and toward the silence of the night. While the adenosine hourglass measures the duration of our wakefulness, the architecture of sleep is also governed by a second, equally powerful system, the circadian rhythm. This internal timing mechanism is controlled by a tiny but profound structure located deep within the hypothalamus, known as the suprachiasmatic nucleus, or the SCN. The SCN is the body's master clock, a cluster of approximately 20,000 neurons that acts as the grand conductor for every biological rhythm in the human system. Situated directly above the point where the optic nerves cross, the master clock is perfectly positioned to receive direct information about the presence or absence of light from the external environment. This connection is made through a specialized pathway called the retinohypothalamic tract, which carries signals from unique light-sensing cells in the retina that are sensitive specifically to blue spectrum light. Even if we are not consciously focused on the brightness of the day, these cells are constantly reporting the intensity of the sun's light to the SCN, allowing the brain to synchronize its internal chemistry with the rotation of the Earth. The architecture of the master clock is built upon a molecular feedback loop that takes approximately 24 hours to complete, ensuring that our biology remains in harmony with the planet's day-night cycle. Within the cells of the SCN, specific proteins are synthesized and degraded in a rhythmic dance, creating a biological beat that dictates when we feel most alert and when we begin to feel the pull of rest. This internal clock does not just regulate sleep, it coordinates the timing of our core body temperature, the release of hormones, the activity of our immune system, and even our metabolic rate. In the morning, The master clock detects the first arrival of blue spectrum light, signaling the brain to suppress the production of sleep-inducing chemicals and to begin the release of cortisol. Cortisol acts as the biological morning alarm, raising our blood pressure and sharpening our focus as we prepare to engage with the challenges of the waking world. As the day progresses, the master clock maintains this high state of alertness, even as the adenosine hourglass we explored in the previous section begins to fill with molecular fatigue. These two systems, the circadian rhythm and the adenosine sleep drive, usually operate in a beautiful, overlapping alignment, creating a window of wakefulness that lasts for about 16 hours. However, as the sun begins to set and the light in the environment shifts toward the warmer, redder spectrum, the input to the SCN changes dramatically. The master clock interprets the fading of blue light as a signal that the biological day is coming to an end, and it begins to initiate the transition toward the nocturnal state. One of the first structural signs of this transition is a subtle but consistent drop in the body's core temperature, which starts to fall in the early evening. The SCN directs the blood vessels in the skin, particularly in the hands and feet, to dilate, allowing internal heat to escape and cooling the body's center in preparation for sleep. This drop in temperature is a vital biological cue, acting as a physical signal to the rest of the brain that the energy-intensive work of the day is being wound down. The master clock also begins to communicate with the pineal gland, a small, pine cone-shaped structure that sits further back in the brain's interior. Under the direction of the SCN, the pineal gland starts to release melatonin, the chemical messenger of the dark, which we will explore in the next phase of our journey. The architecture of the master clock is remarkably resilient, but it can be disrupted by the modern environment, particularly through the use of artificial screens that emit high levels of blue light. When we look at a phone or a computer screen late at night, the light-sensing cells in our eyes send a false signal to the SCN, suggesting that the sun is still high in the sky. This trickery causes the master clock to delay the release of melatonin and the drop in body temperature, creating a state of social jet lag where our internal timing is out of sync with our actual needs. Despite these modern challenges, the SCN remains the steadfast anchor of our biological existence, a tireless timekeeper that has evolved over millions of years to match the pulse of the world. As you visualize this master clock, imagine it as a luminous, rhythmic heart at the center of your brain, pulsing in perfect step with the rising and setting of the sun. There is a deep sense of security in knowing that your body possesses such a sophisticated and ancient mechanism for maintaining its internal order. The master clock ensures that every cell in your body knows exactly what time it is, allowing the entire system to move into the restorative phase as a unified whole. The transition from the SCN's timing to the chemical release of melatonin is a move from the instruction to the execution of the sleep signal. The architecture of the master clock has set the stage, and now the chemical messengers are ready to carry that signal to every corner of your physiology. We rest in the rhythm of the planet, feeling the slow and steady movement of the internal clock as it prepares us for the deep, dark sanctuary of the night. The journey continues toward the pineal gland, where the hormone of rest is even now beginning to flow through the silent corridors of your system. As the master clock in the suprachiasmatic nucleus confirms the arrival of evening, it sends a specialized neurochemical signal to a small, isolated structure nestled deep within the brain's center, the pineal gland. The pineal gland is a tiny, pine cone-shaped organ that has long fascinated scientists and philosophers alike, once being referred to as the third eye due to its ancient evolutionary connection to light-sensing structures in early vertebrates. In the modern human brain, the pineal gland functions as a sophisticated biological transducer, taking the electrical information about environmental darkness and converting it into a potent chemical messenger known as melatonin. The architecture of this gland is unique. It sits outside the blood-brain barrier, allowing it to secrete its hormonal product directly into the bloodstream and the cerebrospinal fluid with remarkable efficiency. The synthesis of melatonin is a masterclass in biological recycling, as the gland takes serotonin, the neurotransmitter associated with waking mood and alertness, and chemically transforms it into the hormone of the night. This transformation only occurs when the master clock silences the inhibitory signals that keep the pineal gland dormant during the daylight hours. As the sun sets and the blue spectrum light fades from our environment, the pineal gland begins its rhythmic work, slowly increasing the concentration of melatonin in the body in a process called dim light melatonin onset. Melatonin is often described by chronobiologists as the vampire hormone because it only emerges in the dark and is instantly suppressed by the presence of bright light, particularly the short wavelength light emitted by modern electronics. It is important to understand that melatonin is not a sedative in the traditional sense. It does not physically force the brain into a state of unconsciousness like a pharmaceutical sleep aid might. Instead, melatonin acts as the official starting pistol for the biological night, a systemic signal that informs every organ and every cell in the body that the window for rest has officially opened. Imagine the melatonin signal as a soft, pervasive shadow that drifts through the corridors of the body, whispering to the heart, the lungs, and the muscles that it is time to shift from a state of action to a state of recovery. As melatonin levels rise, the architecture of our physiology begins to change in subtle but profound ways to accommodate the upcoming sleep cycles. The hormone travels to the blood vessels, particularly those near the surface of the skin, and encourages them to dilate further, accelerating the cooling process we began to explore in the previous section. This drop in core temperature is essential, as it helps to lower the metabolic rate and reduce the energy demands of the body's peripheral tissues. Melatonin also interacts with the heart, encouraging a slow and steady reduction in the resting heart rate and a gentle lowering of blood pressure, easing the strain on the cardiovascular system. At the same time, the hormone signals the digestive system to slow its movements and the pancreas to adjust its insulin production, preparing the body for a long period of fasting during the night. The architecture of the melatonin signal is also intimately connected to the immune system, acting as a powerful antioxidant and an anti-inflammatory agent that begins the work of cellular repair while we are still in the early stages of rest. There is a deep biological peace in this chemical transition, a sense of the body's internal weather shifting from the bright intensity of the day to the cool, quiet moisture of the night. As you visualize this hormone flowing through your system, imagine it as a clear, dark tide that smooths over the jagged edges of the day's stresses, preparing the landscape of your mind for the descent into the deep. The presence of melatonin helps to synchronize the various peripheral clocks found in your liver, your heart, and your kidneys, ensuring that the entire body moves into the nocturnal state as a single, harmonious unit. This chemical messenger creates a state of biological readiness, where the brain becomes highly receptive to the transition into the first stages of sleep. However, the architecture of this system is incredibly delicate, and even a brief flash of bright light can cause the pineal gland to halt its production of melatonin almost instantly. This is why a dim, warm environment is so critical for the melatonin window, allowing the concentration of the hormone to reach the necessary peak to sustain a long and uninterrupted night of rest. Within this window, the mind begins to lose its sharp focus on the external world, and the boundaries of our conscious thoughts start to soften and blur. The melatonin signal provides the chemical permission for the brain's relay station, the thalamus, to begin closing its gates to the outside world. We rest in the flow of this ancient and reliable hormone, acknowledging it as the silent herald of the night that has guided living creatures for millions of years. The transition from the melatonin signal to the silencing of the senses is a move from the systemic preparation to the actual beginning of the sleep journey. The architecture of the biological night is now fully established, and the chemical foundation has been laid for the first descent into the stages of rest. The journey continues toward the thalamus, the grand gatekeeper of our perception, which is even now preparing to draw the velvet curtains across the windows of our senses. The adenosine pressure is high, the master clock has spoken, and the melatonin tide is at its peak, creating the perfect conditions for the mind to finally let go. As the chemical signals of adenosine and melatonin converge, the brain begins to physically decouple itself from the external environment, a process governed by a pair of symmetrical, egg-shaped structures at the very center of the mind, known as the thalamus. The thalamus is often described as the grand central station of the human brain, acting as the primary relay station for almost every piece of sensory information that seeks to reach our conscious awareness. Whether it is the sight of the fading light, the sound of a distant car, or the texture of the sheets against your skin, nearly all of these signals must first pass through the thalamus before the higher processing centers of the cortex can perceive them. The architecture of the thalamus is a complex network of specialized nuclei, each dedicated to a specific sense, such as the lateral geniculate nucleus for vision and the medial geniculate nucleus for sound. During our waking hours, the thalamus is in what scientists call tonic mode, a state where its neurons are highly responsive and faithfully transmit every incoming signal from the outside world directly to the conscious mind. In this state, the gate is wide open, allowing the brain to remain vigilant, active, and fully integrated with the surrounding environment. However, as the biological night deepens and the sleep pressure reaches its peak, the master clock signals a shift in the electrical behavior of these thalamic neurons. Under the influence of the sleep-promoting neurotransmitter GABA, which acts as the brain's primary chemical brake, the thalamus begins to shift from its transfer mode into a rhythmic burst mode. In this new state, the neurons in the thalamus stop firing in response to external stimuli and instead begin to fire in synchronized, rhythmic pulses that are internal to the brain itself. This electrical transition is the physical act of closing the gate, a biological drawing of the velvet curtains that effectively silences the noise of the external world. As the thalamic gate closes, your conscious mind begins to lose its connection to the room around you, a sensation often experienced as the softening of reality. The sounds that were clear only moments ago, the ticking of a clock, the hum of a fan, or the rustle of fabric start to fade into a distant, indistinguishable blur before disappearing entirely. This is not because your ears have stopped hearing, but but because the thalamus has decided that those signals are no longer relevant to the restorative work that is about to begin. The architecture of the thalamus also filters out the constant stream of information from the somatosensory system, which monitors the position and feeling of your limbs. This is why, as you drift towards sleep, you may experience the strange and peaceful sensation that your body is becoming weightless, or that the boundaries of your physical form are melting into the surface beneath you. The gate has effectively severed the link between the sensory receptors in your skin and the map of the body in your brain, allowing you to exist in a state of pure, internal consciousness. This sensory isolation is essential for the transition into deep sleep, as it prevents minor environmental changes from triggering a startle response that would return the brain to a state of high arousal wakefulness. While the thalamus is closing the doors to the outside, it is simultaneously opening a door to the inner world of the subconscious. By silencing the distractions of the environment, the thalamus allows the cortex to turn its attention inward, beginning the process of reviewing the day's experiences and preparing for the first stages of the sleep cycle. The architecture of this gatekeeper is so sophisticated that it can still allow priority signals through, such as a sudden loud noise or the sound of your own name, which act as an emergency override to the sleep state. But in a quiet and safe environment, the thalamus remains a steadfast guardian, maintaining a rhythmic barrier that protects the fragile process of falling asleep. There is a profound sense of security in this biological shutdown, a realization that your brain has a dedicated mechanism designed to give you a total reprieve from the demands of the world. As you visualize this egg-shaped structure at the heart of your mind, imagine it slowly dimming the lights and locking the doors of your perception, one by one. The bursting rhythm of the thalamic neurons creates a steady, pulsing wall of protection that keeps the chaos of the world at bay. Within this silent sanctuary, the mind is finally free to let go of its analytical, waking functions and settle into the fluid, associative state that precedes the first stage of sleep. The closure of the thalamic gate marks the true boundary between the world of doing and the world of being, between the external landscape and the internal one. The architecture of the thalamus has provided the necessary isolation, and now the electrical rhythms of the brain are ready to slow down even further. We rest in the silence that the gatekeeper has created, feeling the deep peace of a mind that is no longer required to watch, to listen, or to respond. The journey continues toward the first and second stages of non-REM sleep, where the brain will begin its slow, mesmerizing descent into the deep. The adenosine is high, the melatonin is flowing, the clock is steady, and the gate is firmly and safely closed. As the thalamic gate draws the curtains on the external world, the brain enters the first phase of non-rapid eye movement sleep, known as NREM Stage 1. This is the lightest stage of sleep, a fleeting bridge between the world of alertness and the world of unconsciousness that usually lasts for only 5 to 10 minutes. The architecture of your brain waves undergoes a dramatic shift here, moving from the fast, jagged beta and alpha waves of wakefulness into the slower, more fluid theta waves. In this state, the mind begins to lose its logical, linear grip on reality, often drifting into what scientists call hypnagogic hallucinations, fleeting, dreamlike images, or the sensation of falling that can cause a sudden, involuntary muscle twitch known as a hypnic jerk. This jerk is a fascinating biological relic, a protective reflex where the brain misinterprets the sudden relaxation of the muscles as a fall and sends a frantic electrical signal to catch yourself. As the theta waves become more dominant, the architecture of your consciousness shifts from thinking to drifting. And if you were to be nudged at this moment, you might insist that you were never actually asleep. However, as the descent continues, you slide deeper into stage 2 NREM sleep, which is the workhorse of the sleep cycle, making up nearly 50% of your total time spent at rest. The architecture of stage 2 is defined by 2 unique and beautiful neural signatures that act as the sentinels of your slumber: sleep spindles and K complexes. Sleep spindles are sudden, high-frequency bursts of activity that look like tight, electrical zigzags on a brain monitor, representing a conversation between the thalamus and the cortex. These spindles are the brain's way of noise-proofing your sleep. They act as a physical buffer, suppressing outside sounds and internal distractions to ensure you aren't easily startled back into wakefulness. The more sleep spindles your brain generates, the more resilient your sleep is to the environment, and they also play a critical role in the first stages of memory integration. Accompanying these spindles are the K complexes, the largest single electrical events in the healthy human brain, which appear as a sharp, high-voltage peak followed by a deep valley in the brainwave pattern. A K complex is essentially a check-in by the brain, a brief moment where the system acknowledges a faint stimulus, decides it isn't a threat, and then issues a massive stay asleep command to the rest of the cortex. The architecture of stage 2 is a place of profound physiological transition. Your heart rate continues its steady decline, your breathing becomes more rhythmic and shallow, and your body temperature drops another fraction of a degree. Within this stage, the brain begins the essential task of cleaning up the day's mental clutter, preparing the synapses for the deeper, more restorative stages that lie ahead. As you visualize this descent, imagine yourself on a slow-moving escalator, traveling downward into a warm, dark space where the sharp edges of your thoughts are being smoothed away. The theta rhythm is like a slow, hypnotic pulse that begins to synchronize the different lobes of the brain, pulling them into a unified state of relaxation. In stage 2, the mind is no longer interested in the what or the how of the day. It is shifting its energy toward the maintenance of the biological machine. This stage acts as a structural anchor, providing a stable platform from which the brain can safely plunge into the deep, slow-wave rhythms of N3. There is a deep peace in this middle ground, a feeling of being safely tucked away in a neural fortress where the world cannot reach you. The architecture of stage 1 and 2 has successfully navigated the transition from the light to the dark, and the theta waves have prepared the way for the delta waves. We rest in the rhythmic pulsing of the sleep spindles, feeling the steady, electrical heartbeat of a brain that is protecting its own recovery. The transition from this stage to the next is a shift from the shallows to the deep, as the electrical pulses of the brain grow larger, slower, and more powerful. The journey continues toward the deep, slow-wave sleep of stage 3, the absolute basement of the human experience and the source of our physical repair. The architecture of the descent is complete, and the mind is now ready for the profound stillness of the delta rhythm. As we leave the waiting room of stage 2, we descend into the most profound and essential destination of the night: slow-wave sleep, also known as N3 or deep sleep. This is the physical and mental basement of the human experience, a state of consciousness so distant from the waking world that it is often difficult to rouse someone once they have reached it. The architecture of N3 is defined by the emergence of delta waves, the slowest, highest amplitude electrical signals the brain can produce. During the day, our brain cells are like a crowded city where everyone is shouting at once in a chaotic, high-frequency hum. In deep sleep, those millions of neurons suddenly fall into a magnificent, unified rhythm. They begin to pulse in a slow, synchronized up state of intense activity, followed by a down state of total electrical silence, happening about once or twice every second. This is the neural equivalent of a massive, slow-moving tide, where the entire cortex breathes as one single, rhythmic entity. This synchronization is the primary signal for the body to initiate its most intensive structural repairs and growth. While the brain is pulsing in these deep delta rhythms, the pituitary gland releases a massive surge of growth hormone into the bloodstream. In children, this is when physical growth occurs, but in adults, this hormone is the master architect of tissue repair, muscle synthesis, and the strengthening of the skeletal system. The architecture of deep sleep is also where the immune system does its most critical work, as the body directs energy away from the brain's processing and toward the production of T cells and the regulation of inflammation. This is why deep sleep is the ultimate medicine. It is the only time the body can focus its entire metabolic budget on fixing the wear and tear of the day. Because the brain is so quiet during N3, the blood flow to the cortex is significantly reduced, diverted instead to the muscles to facilitate recovery from physical exertion. The architecture of the mind during this phase is one of total blackout. There are no vivid dreams here, only a heavy, dreamless void that serves as a total reset for the human spirit. If you have ever woken up feeling groggy or disoriented, it is likely because you were pulled out of this deep, slow wave state before the cycle was complete, a phenomenon known as sleep inertia. There is a profound beauty in this biological downtime, a state of being where the self disappears and only the ancient cellular machinery remains active. As you visualize these massive, rolling delta waves, imagine them as deep, heavy swells in a dark ocean, carrying away the debris of the day and leaving behind a smooth, clean surface. This is the period of maximum rest for the heart, which reaches its lowest rate and blood pressure of the entire 24-hour cycle, allowing the cardiovascular architecture to recover from the stress of gravity and movement. The sleep pressure we felt from the adenosine buildup in section 1 is finally being cleared away at the highest rate during this stage, as the brain begins to pay back its most urgent biological debts. N3 is usually most concentrated in the first half of the night, as the body prioritizes this physical restoration above all else to ensure survival for the coming day. The architecture of slow-wave sleep is the ultimate sanctuary, a place where time ceases to exist and the body returns to its most fundamental, healing state. We rest in the absolute stillness of the delta rhythm, feeling the weight of the world lifted as the master architect of the body goes to work in the silent dark. The transition from this electrical stillness to the hydraulic movement of the next stage is a shift from structure to cleaning. The journey continues toward the glymphatic system, where the slow wave pulses of the neurons act as a pump for a remarkable nocturnal tide of fluid. The architecture of the deep has provided the repair, and now the system is ready for the deep wash that will clarify the mind. We sink into the dreamless void, acknowledging N3 as the foundation of our physical health and the deepest well of our resilience. While the brain pulses in the slow, deep delta rhythms of the previous stage, a remarkable hydraulic process begins to occur that is unlike anything seen during the waking hours. For decades, scientists wondered how the brain, the most metabolically active organ in the body, managed to dispose of its cellular waste, given that it lacks the traditional lymphatic system found in the rest of the physiology. The answer was discovered recently in a system known as the glymphatic system, a nocturnal plumbing network that only becomes fully active when we are in the deepest stages of non-REM sleep. During the day, the space between your brain cells is tightly packed, allowing for the rapid electrical communication required for thinking and moving, but leaving very little room for fluid to circulate. However, as you enter the deep stillness of slow-wave sleep, a dramatic architectural change occurs. The brain's glial cells, which act as the support structure for neurons, actually shrink in size by up to 60%. This shrinkage creates a vast increase in the interstitial space, the narrow alleys and streets between the neurons, effectively opening up the floodgates for a restorative tide. Under the rhythmic pressure of the slow delta waves, the cerebrospinal fluid, or CSF, is pumped with increased force from the brain's outer surfaces deep into the internal tissue. This fluid acts like a high-pressure rinse, surging through the newly opened spaces and washing away the metabolic debris that has accumulated during the day's activities. The primary target of this glymphatic wash is the clearance of toxic proteins such as amyloid beta and tau, which are the natural byproducts of neural metabolism. If these proteins are allowed to remain and stagnate, they can form sticky plaques that interfere with the brain's communication and long-term health, much like silt clogging the pipes of a complex machine. The architecture of the glymphatic wash is a masterpiece of biological engineering, using the same energy that creates our deep sleep to power a total hydraulic cleaning of our most precious organ. As you visualize this process, imagine a clear, cool spring of water rising up through the dark soil of your mind, gently carrying away the dust and the heat of the day's thoughts. There is a profound sense of clarity in this movement, a feeling of being refreshed from the inside out as the fluid carries the waste products toward the veins for eventual disposal by the liver. This is the biological reason why a night of deep sleep feels like a mental reset, as the chemical environment of the brain is literally scrubbed clean and returned to its pristine morning state. The glymphatic system works most efficiently when the body is in a state of total physical stillness and the heart rate is at its lowest, allowing the CSF to flow without the interference of the high-pressure blood flow of wakefulness. This hydraulic tide is not a chaotic splash, but an organized and rhythmic movement that follows the architecture of the brain's blood vessels, using them as guide rails to reach every hidden corner of the cortex. As the fluid circulates, it also helps to distribute essential nutrients and glucose to the neurons, ensuring that the brain is not only clean but also fully replenished for the coming day. The synchronization between the electrical delta waves and this hydraulic wash is one of the most beautiful examples of planetary scale engineering occurring within the microscopic world of our cells. There is a deep, rhythmic peace in the thought of this nocturnal tide, a silent washing of the mind that occurs while we are completely unaware of its power. The architecture of the glymphatic wash ensures that the molecular hourglass of adenosine is not just emptied, but that the entire container is polished and restored. By the time this phase of the night is complete, the brain's internal environment has been transformed from a crowded, dusty workshop into a clean, quiet sanctuary. We rest in the flow of this clear internal spring, feeling the gentle rinsing of our consciousness as the deep sleep continues its work. The transition from this hydraulic cleaning to the next phase of the night is a shift from maintenance to integration. The architecture of the wash has provided the clarity, and now the brain is ready to shift its focus toward the complex world of memory and imagination. The journey continues toward the paradox of REM sleep, where the brain will suddenly burst into a new kind of activity, a vibrant internal theater of dreams. We acknowledge the glymphatic wash as the silent guardian of our cognitive longevity, the nightly ritual that keeps the light of our mind burning bright. As the night progresses and the deep, hydraulic cleaning of the slow wave stages begins to subside, the architecture of the brain undergoes a startling and vibrant transformation. We enter the realm of rapid eye movement sleep, or REM, a stage so unique and physiologically intense that it is often called paradoxical sleep. During the earlier stages of the night, the brain was focused on silence, synchronization, and physical repair, but in REM, the electrical patterns of the mind suddenly shift back to a state that looks almost identical to being wide awake. The jagged, high-frequency brain waves return, and the metabolism of the brain surges, consuming as much energy as it does when you are solving a complex puzzle or engaging in a lively conversation. However, this intense activity is not directed toward the outside world. It is an entirely internal theater, a state where the brain is disconnected from its physical shell to explore the landscape of imagination. The architecture of REM sleep is governed by a specialized cluster of neurons in the brainstem that acts as a master switch, flooding the cortex with acetylcholine, a neurotransmitter that sparks vivid, associative thinking. Under this chemical influence, the brain begins to create the immersive, often surreal experiences we know as dreams, weaving together fragments of memory, emotion, and abstract imagery into a seamless narrative. Yet, while the brain is burning with this internal fire, the body remains in a state of profound and necessary stillness. To prevent us from physically acting out our dreams, which could be dangerous in a world governed by gravity, the brainstem sends a powerful inhibitory signal down the spinal cord. This signal creates a state of temporary muscle paralysis known as atonia, where every voluntary muscle in the body, from the arms and legs to the core, is effectively switched off. Only the muscles of the heart, the diaphragm for breathing, and the extraocular muscles that move the eyes remain active during this phase. This is why the stage is named for the rapid, darting movements of the eyes beneath the lids, which some scientists believe are tracking the shifting gaze of the dream self as it navigates the internal world. The architecture of REM sleep is the only time in our lives when the brain is completely liberated from the constraints of the body and the physical laws of the environment. This stage is primarily focused on emotional regulation and the processing of complex social and psychological information. During REM, the brain's emotional center, the amygdala, becomes up to 30% more active than it is during the day, allowing us to process difficult experiences in a safe, chemically controlled environment. Crucially, the brain also shuts off the production of noradrenaline, the chemical associated with stress and anxiety, creating a stress-free space where emotional memories can be reviewed without the painful sting of the bodhi. Original event. There is a profound healing power in this paradox. It is as if the brain is performing a form of nocturnal therapy, stripping the emotional charge from our memories so we can wake up with a clearer and more resilient perspective. As you visualize this state, imagine your mind as a vibrant, glowing city within a vast, silent forest. The body is the quiet forest, while the mind is the city alive with the light of 1,000 stories. The rhythm of REM sleep becomes longer and more intense as the morning approaches, as the brain has already completed its most urgent physical repairs and can now dedicate more time to its mental and emotional architecture. This is the era of the night where creativity flourishes, as the brain makes remote and unexpected connections between seemingly unrelated ideas, leading to the aha moments that often arrive just after waking. The architecture of the paradox ensures that we are not just physically restored, but psychologically integrated, prepared to handle the social and emotional complexities of the coming day. There is a deep sense of wonder in the realization that every night you possess an internal sanctuary of infinite possibility, where the rules of the world are suspended for the sake of your mental health. As the REM cycle concludes, the brain doesn't just wake up, it gently transitions back into the lighter stages of non-REM sleep, repeating the grand cycle of the night several times. The transition from the vivid theater of REM to the analytical work of the next stage is a move from feeling to filing. The architecture of the paradox has provided the emotional clearing, and now the brain is ready to decide which of these experiences are worth keeping forever. The journey continues towards synaptic pruning and memory consolidation, where the raw data of the day is forged into the permanent structure of your history. We rest in the safety of this creative paralysis, acknowledging REM as the guardian of our sanity and the secret source of our most imaginative thoughts. While the body remains still and the theater of REM sleep begins to quiet, the brain initiates one of its most critical architectural tasks, the physical reorganization of its neural connections, a process known as synaptic pruning and memory consolidation. During the day, as we navigate the world, learn new skills, and meet new people, our brain is in a state of constant expansion, creating thousands of new synaptic connections as it tries to record every detail of our waking experience. However, the architecture of the brain has a limited amount of physical space and metabolic energy. It simply cannot keep every piece of information it encounters without becoming cluttered and inefficient. Sleep is the time when the brain shifts from acquisition mode to editing mode, deciding which connections are essential to our identity and which are merely the static of a passing day. This process is driven by the principle of synaptic homeostasis, where the brain systematically weakens or removes the less important neural pathways to make room for the significant ones to grow stronger. Imagine your mind as a vast, lush garden that has grown unchecked during the long hours of the sunlight. Sleep is the master gardener who arrives in the night with a pair of shears to trim back the weeds and the overgrowth. By pruning away the trivial details, the color of a stranger's shirt, the price of a mundane item, the noise of a distant conversation, the brain ensures that the most important memories are highlighted and preserved. At the same time, the architecture of the brain is busy moving the files of the day from their temporary storage in the hippocampus to their permanent home in the long-term storage of the neocortex. The hippocampus is like a high-speed short-term buffer, a small, curved structure that is excellent at recording information quickly but has a very limited capacity. During the deep pulses of non-REM sleep and the bursts of REM, the brain replays the day's learning at 10 times the normal speed, firing the neurons in the same sequence they were used during the waking hours. This neural rehearsal strengthens the connections in the cortex, effectively hardwiring your new skills and insights into the physical fabric of your brain. This is why sleep is not just a period of rest for the mind, but a period of active construction, where the experiences of today are transformed into the wisdom of tomorrow. There is a profound and rhythmic beauty in this process, a sense of the mind being distilled and refined as the hours of the night pass. As you visualize this pruning, imagine the millions of tiny electrical bridges in your brain being carefully evaluated, with the strongest ones glowing brighter while the unnecessary ones fade back into the dark. This structural refinement is what allows us to wake up with a sense of mental clarity, our brains having discarded the noise and kept the signal of our lives. The architecture of synaptic pruning also plays a vital role in our ability to learn complex tasks, as the brain cleans the slate of the hippocampus every night, making it fresh and ready to absorb new information the next morning. Without this nightly edit, our ability to learn would quickly saturate, leaving us unable to form new memories or adapt to new environments. The brain's ability to forget is just as important as its ability to remember, and sleep is the primary mechanism that maintains this delicate balance. As the pruning continues, the brain also works to integrate new information with old knowledge, searching for patterns and connections that may not have been obvious during the distractions of the day. This is the architectural basis for sleeping on a problem, where the brain's nocturnal reorganization leads to a sudden breakthrough or a new way of seeing a difficult situation. There is a deep, biological peace in knowing that while you rest, your mind is working tirelessly to curate your history and to sharpen the tools of your intellect. The rhythm of this consolidation is slow and methodical, a quiet and invisible labor that ensures the continuity of your selfhood. The architecture of the brain is being optimized, its circuits streamlined, and its energy stores carefully managed for the challenges that lie ahead. The transition from this internal mental filing to the systemic needs of the rest of the body is a shift from the processor to the vessel. The architecture of pruning has refined the mind, and now the focus shifts to the nocturnal body, where the heart, the lungs, and the immune system are undergoing their own midnight patrol. The journey continues toward the systems of the physical frame, which have been quietly recovering under the protection of the brain's deep slumber. We rest in the knowledge that our memories are safe, our minds are being clarified, and our history is being etched into the enduring stone of our neural architecture. While the brain is busy with its internal theater and its rigorous architectural pruning, the rest of the physical frame is undergoing a total systemic overhaul known as the nocturnal body. During the waking hours, the body's energy budget is largely dedicated to external movement, sensory processing, and the maintenance of a high arousal state. But sleep allows the biological system to redirect its resources toward internal maintenance. The architecture of the nocturnal body is governed by the parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest branch of the autonomic nervous system, which takes full control as the night deepens. This shift is marked by a profound change in the cardiovascular system. The heart rate slows significantly, and the blood pressure drops to its lowest levels of the day, a phenomenon known as nocturnal dipping. This reduction in pressure is essential for the longevity of our blood vessels, providing the delicate architecture of the arteries a much-needed reprieve from the constant rhythmic pounding of the waking pulse. As the heart finds its steady, nocturnal rhythm, the respiratory system follows suit, with breathing becoming slower, deeper, and more abdominal. This deep, rhythmic breathing ensures that the blood remains fully oxygenated while the metabolic demands of the muscles are at their lowest, creating an ideal environment for cellular repair. In this state of physical stillness, the immune system launches its midnight patrol, a period of high-intensity surveillance and defense that is impossible to maintain during the activity of the day. Specialized white blood cells, such as T cells and natural killer cells, move more efficiently through the bloodstream and the lymphatic vessels, identifying and neutralizing potential threats like viruses and bacteria. The architecture of the immune system is also busy producing cytokines, protective proteins, that help the body respond to inflammation and infection. This is the biological reason why we are advised to sleep when we are unwell. The nocturnal body is the primary shipyard where our defenses are repaired and our biological armor is reinforced. Simultaneously, the endocrine system is conducting a massive hormonal rebalancing, shifting the body away from the stress hormones of the day and toward the growth and repair hormones of the night. The pituitary gland continues its rhythmic release of growth hormone, which travels through the blood to the skin, bones, and muscles to stimulate protein synthesis and cellular regeneration. This is the architecture of beauty sleep in a literal sense, as the increased blood flow to the skin during the night allows for the repair of damaged cells and the production of new collagen. There is a deep, rhythmic peace in the visualization of this internal labor, the millions of tiny cellular repairs, the silent movement of the immune patrol, and the slow, steady pulsing of the resting heart. As you rest, your muscles are in a state of near-total relaxation, allowing the joints and the spine to decompress from the constant weight of gravity. The architecture of the skeletal system is restored as the fluid-filled discs between your vertebrae rehydrate, making you a fraction of an inch taller by the time you wake than you were when you went to bed. This systemic recovery is a masterpiece of biological coordination, where every organ is given the opportunity to reset its internal chemistry and to clear away the toxins of the day. The nocturnal body is not a passive or dormant state, but an era of intense and purposeful activity that ensures the survival and vitality of the organism. Without this period of internal focus, the body's structures would quickly degrade under the stress of constant use, leading to the collapse of the immune system and the exhaustion of the cardiovascular frame. The architecture of the nocturnal body ensures that we are not just surviving from one day to the next, but that we are being actively rebuilt, refined, and fortified during the hours of the dark. As you visualize your heart beating with its slow, nocturnal strength, imagine the vast network of your blood vessels being smoothed and cleaned by the low-pressure tide. There is a profound sense of security in the realization that your body knows exactly how to take care of itself while your consciousness is elsewhere. The rhythm of the nocturnal body is the rhythm of life itself, a slow and steady pulse of renewal that has been perfected over eons of evolution. The transition from this physical repair to the chemical regulation of the next phase is a move from the hardware to the software of the system. The architecture of the nocturnal body has provided the physical foundation, and now the focus shifts toward the metabolic balance that dictates our energy and appetite for the coming day. The journey continues toward the metabolic balance of the nocturnal system, where the hormones of hunger and satiety are being carefully recalibrated. We rest in the strength of our physical recovery, acknowledging the nocturnal body as the tireless guardian of our health and the silent engineer of our endurance. While the physical repairs of the nocturnal body reach their peak, the brain and the endocrine system collaborate on a final, sophisticated architectural task: the recalibration of the body's metabolic software. Sleep is the primary regulator of our energy economy, the silent period during which the brain balances the books of our internal fuel supplies and adjusts the hormonal dials that control our appetite and blood sugar. The architecture of this metabolic balance is governed by a delicate interplay between several key hormones, most notably leptin and ghrelin, which act as the gas pedal and the brake for our hunger. During the deep stages of rest, the body increases the production of leptin, a hormone that signals a sense of fullness and satiety to the brain, effectively telling the system that it does not need to seek out food during the night. Simultaneously, the levels of ghrelin, the hormone that triggers the sensation of hunger and the desire to eat, are suppressed, ensuring that the nocturnal body can focus its energy on repair rather than digestion. This hormonal architecture is essential for maintaining a healthy weight and a stable metabolism, as it prevents the body from entering a state of constant energy seeking. When sleep is fragmented or shortened, this balance is violently disrupted. The levels of leptin plummet and the levels of ghrelin surge, leading to the intense cravings for high-calorie, sugar-rich foods that often follow a poor night of rest. The architecture of the nocturnal system also plays a critical role in how the body manages glucose, or blood sugar, through the regulation of insulin sensitivity. During the night, the cells of the body are recalibrated to respond efficiently to insulin, ensuring that the glucose in our bloodstream can be properly converted into energy or stored for later use. This metabolic tuning acts as a protective shield against the development of insulin resistance and type 2 diabetes, maintaining the long-term integrity of our internal energy pathways. As the night progresses, the liver also takes part in this architectural reorganization, managing the storage of glycogen and ensuring that there is a steady, slow-release supply of fuel for the heart and the brain while we fast. There is a deep, rhythmic peace in the visualization of this chemical balancing act, the silent adjustment of the levers and pulleys that dictate how we will feel and how much energy we will have when we wake. As you rest, imagine your body's internal sensors carefully scanning your nutrient levels, fine-tuning your hormones with the precision of a master watchmaker. This metabolic balance ensures that you wake up with a stable blood sugar level and a suppressed appetite, allowing you to start your day with a clear mind and a steady supply of physical energy. The architecture of sleep also influences the production of growth hormone, which we explored in earlier sections. But here it acts as a powerful metabolic agent that encourages the body to burn fat for energy instead of breaking down muscle tissue. This is the biological reason why sleep is so fundamental to the maintenance of lean muscle mass and the healthy distribution of body fat. It is the only time the system is chemically optimized for this specific type of energy management. Within this metabolic window, the brain also regulates the levels of the hormone adiponectin, which helps to protect the cardiovascular system and improves the body's ability to handle fats in the bloodstream. The rhythm of this metabolic recalibration is slow and steady, mirroring the slow wave pulses of the deep sleep that facilitates it. Without this nightly period of chemical reorganization, the body's energy systems would become erratic and inefficient, leading to systemic inflammation and a chronic state of metabolic stress. The architecture of the metabolic balance ensures that our internal fuel tank is properly pressurized and that our appetite signals are reset to their baseline for the coming day. As you visualize this chemical harmony, imagine a series of glowing blue scales in the center of your being, slowly coming into a state of perfect horizontal alignment. There is a profound sense of security in knowing that your body is managing its most complex energetic needs while you are safely tucked away in the sanctuary of your dreams. The rhythm of the night is now reaching its final stages, with the metabolic books balanced and the physical repairs almost complete. The transition from this deep chemical regulation to the final awakening is a move from the hidden to the revealed. The architecture of the metabolic balance has provided the internal fuel, and now the focus shifts toward the gentle rise toward consciousness and the return to the waking world. The journey continues toward the waking threshold, where the final reflection on the power of rest will prepare the mind for the light of a new day. We rest in the knowledge that our energy is being replenished, our hormones are being balanced, and our metabolism is being fortified for the hours of activity ahead. As the grand cycle of the night draws toward its inevitable conclusion, we arrive at the final architectural transition, the waking threshold. This is the delicate boundary where the deep, internal world of biological repair begins to dissolve, making way for the return of the conscious self and the light of a new day. The architecture of the waking threshold is not a sudden eruption, but a carefully choreographed sequence of hormonal and electrical shifts that gently lift the mind out of the depths of the nocturnal state. As the early morning light begins to filter through the eyelids, even in the smallest amounts, the master clock in the suprachiasmatic nucleus detects the change and signals the end of the biological night. The pineal gland receives its final instruction for the cycle, and the production of melatonin, the hormone of the dark, slows to a halt, its levels in the bloodstream beginning to fade like the morning mist. In its place, the adrenal glands begin to secrete a controlled surge of cortisol, the biological activation signal that prepares the heart, the lungs, and the brain for the demands of movement and focus. This rise in cortisol acts as a gentle internal sunrise, increasing the body's core temperature back toward its waking baseline and sharpening the sensitivity of our senses. The architecture of the brainwaves begins to shift once again, moving away from the slow, heavy delta and theta rhythms and toward the faster, more alert patterns of alpha and beta activity. The thalamic gate, which has stood as a steadfast guardian of our silence for hours, begins to open its velvet curtains, once again allowing the sounds and textures of the external world to reach our conscious awareness. As the gate opens, the first sensations of the morning, the weight of the blanket, the temperature of the air, the distant sound of a bird begin to integrate with our returning sense of self. There is a profound sense of newness in this threshold, a realization that the person waking up is physically and chemically different from the person who went to sleep the night before. The architecture of the brain has been washed by the glymphatic tides, the synapses have been pruned and refined, and the memories of the previous day have been safely etched into the stone of the long-term cortex. The nocturnal body has completed its shipyard repairs, the immune system has finished its patrol, and the metabolic books have been balanced with perfect chemical precision. As you visualize this return to the surface, Imagine yourself rising slowly through clear, still water, moving toward a bright and shimmering reflection above. The adenosine hourglass we explored at the very beginning of our journey has been completely emptied, and the molecular pressure has been reset to zero, leaving the mind feeling light, clear, and ready to begin again. This is the gift of the biological night, a total systemic renewal that allows the human organism to endure the challenges of time and the stresses of the waking world. The architecture of sleep is a testament to the planet's wisdom, a repeating cycle of shadow and light that ensures the longevity of the mind and the vitality of the frame. As the narration fades into the final silence, imagine the internal clock of your being ticking in perfect, quiet synchronization with the pulse of the earth. The journey through the biology of rest is complete, but the rhythm of the cycles will continue, night after night, as long as the heart beats and the stars turn. There is a deep and lasting peace in the knowledge that your body is a self-healing masterpiece, a sanctuary of balance that knows exactly how to return to the light after its journey through the dark. The threshold is crossed, the mind is refreshed, and the world is waiting, its colors appearing a little brighter and its possibilities a little more vast because of the rest you have achieved. We rest in the final, lingering stillness of the night, acknowledging sleep as the silent partner of our consciousness and the primary architect of our well-being. The layers of the night are settled, the work is done, and the architecture of the self is once again whole. The journey of the biological night concludes here, in the quiet warmth of a system that has been perfectly restored by the power of its own ancient and intelligent rhythms.